Throughout the year, we've unraveled how the past impacts the present. The first 3 installments of my series, Follow the Line, reveal the history of discrimination in New Orleans, which is a line that can be traced back to the city's origin story. In episode 4, we reveal how that discrimination yielded negative and even deadly results for some New Orleanians. Well, they say your zip code can determine your life expectancy.
I'm scared to go over there, honestly.
It happens too much.
I'm gonna die in this bed.
But if you were to put a map of New Orleans against the redlining map of the city, you'll learn life expectancy isn't the only thing your zip code can determine.
If you essentially segregate Black folks and other people of color into certain neighborhoods, then you're going to have compounding effects in terms of, exposure to violence, lack of access to healthy foods, a number of isolating effects that are going to be detrimental.
24 hours, more than 7,000 new COVID cases were reported in Louisiana.
The most recent example of those compounding effects is the rate of COVID-19 infections in New Orleans at the beginning of the pandemic.
I don't know what to think. I don't know what to trust. I don't know. This is terrible.
4 members of the same family, all suffering from COVID-19, died within days of each other.
Studies by the New Orleans Data Center show COVID-19 disproportionately affected Black residents. In the first year of the pandemic, Black residents made up 77% of COVID deaths. White residents made up less than 20%. If you take out those who live in long-term care facilities like nursing homes, there was an 88% death rate for Black residents and only a 9% for white residents.
It became apparent almost immediately that there was a pattern.
In 2020, Jeff Adelson, with our partners at the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate, created a database of COVID infections by neighborhood. The map indicated which neighborhoods early in the pandemic had the highest rate of infection.
By the spring of 2020, which is when we started doing some of our geographic analysis, it was very clear that, particularly in New Orleans, communities that were largely Black and also communities that were lower income than average were seeing a higher number of infections.
Were there any communities that were alarming to you when it came to death and infection rates?
New Orleans East, particularly the Little Woods area, if I recall correctly, had a particularly high rate.
The overall importance to stay alive.
It's interesting to note that areas like Lakeview and some of the wealthier uptown neighborhoods anyway, had particularly low rates, and those are generally whiter, wealthier areas in the city.
But why the disparity in impact?
These are communities that were already dealing with a lack of access to opportunities, and then these twin crises have compounded the harm that was already visited upon these communities.
Maxwell Ciardulo and Karshana Hill are with the Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. We'll get to them in a second. The New Orleans Data Center believes the disproportionate impact in COVID cases is connected to multi-generational housing and frontline occupations. Just last year, the Pew Research Center found Asian, Black, and Hispanic Americans are most likely to live in multi-generational family households, for reasons ranging from financial issues to caring for a loved one. As far as frontline occupations, hospitality industry, tourism industry, even grocery store workers are all considered essential workers. Hotel jobs, for instance, put those workers in direct contact from people who come from all over the world. And in 2018, this is the year before the pandemic, 57% of the hotel workforce was African American, 9% was Hispanic, and 29% were white. But the lowest wage jobs were disproportionately held by the Black and Hispanic workers. Now, of course, in the height of the pandemic, a lot of people lost work or work came to a halt. And when your work comes to a halt, you lose money. When you lose money, you can't pay rent. And when you can't pay rent, you face eviction.
Many people are anxious these days, wondering if they'll have a job to pay the rent.
If I lose my job, where am I going?
No evictions are allowed during the coronavirus emergency.
But he still put the notice on it.
Landlords getting greedy.
Almost every month I was thinking I was going to end up on the street because I couldn't afford the rent.
This is not just paper. These are people.
Back to Maxwell and Karshana.
We have eviction court data that shows where those cases are coming from, and we have infection and death data from COVID that shows where those cases are coming from. And it's no surprise to us that the same neighborhoods that were disinvested from and not offered an opportunity to thrive, not offered opportunities for home ownership or to build wealth, those same neighborhoods are the ones that today still, generations later are still being devalued and are still seeing the effects of this.
In a 2019 study, Jane Place Neighborhood Sustainability Initiative used court data to reveal that evictions predominantly impacted Black renters. The neighborhoods that were hotbeds for evictions: Treme, New Orleans East, Central City, and the Lower Garden District.
We've set up a system where low-income and working-class Black folks in this city are just being displaced.
The water is steady rising in the attic, ma'am. And I'm drowning in the attic.
Coming all through the floors, through the doors.
Pray for me, huh?
Oh, Sarah, I will pray. I'm going to have to pray for everybody, even myself.
If you look at the rest of the city, you will see there's a direct correlation between race, income, and lower flood elevation. Generally speaking, the poor folks and the Black folks are going to be in the lower flood elevations.
When we woke up, they had water coming right through the floors, and that's when we had to go to the attic.
The only exception to that is the Lakeview area, and the Lakeview area is a white wealthy area simply because it's right next to lake, and so as a principle of real estate, if you're close to a body of water, if you're close to a waterfront, the property values go up.
My mother and I were stranded in the attic, and she's a diabetic.
Hurricane Katrina damaged most of the city of New Orleans in some way, but minority communities took a harder hit. While there is data to show that correlation, the images we saw tell the same story.
Put the pumps on. Get the water out of here. Get the water out.
The disaster left New Orleanians sprawled across the country. Some stayed wherever they landed, while many attempted to return. But the help being offered by the federal government exposed yet another disproportionate challenge.
Trying to get the attention of rescuers.
The U.S. government used a formula of using home values to factor into rebuilding grants. The formula shortchanged people who live in poor neighborhoods, instead giving people living in wealthy neighborhoods more help to rebuild their homes.
Well, that was something that I tried to find.
WWL investigator David Hammer covered this disparity extensively, along with our partners at the Times-Picayune, New Orleans Advocate, and ProPublica.
I quickly found that because of the way they had created the program, the Road Home program, and giving grants based on the value of the house, not on the cost of rebuilding each house, you ended up in a situation where the same exact house, same size, same materials in two different neighborhoods, one majority Black, one majority white, were getting different amounts of money because of the historically lower values of homes in Black neighborhoods.
We have properties that have been untouched since the day of the storm.
The NAACP Legal Defense Fund and Fair Housing Group sued to say that this was discrimination, racial discrimination, and it never concluded in court.
But you said that settling outside of court kind of was a missed opportunity for them to correct some of the wrongs of the past.
This was a huge disaster. We can almost start fresh, start over, and correct the wrongs of the past where people in Black neighborhoods had devalued homes because of redlining, because of these historic inequities with home lending. And all of that could have been wiped away if they had created a program that was more equitable. And they missed the opportunity. And I don't think that there was any evidence that that was done on purpose. In fact, there were a number of things that they implemented, including additional grants for lower income people that was supposed to wipe away some of those historic inequities based on how much people made based on their income. The problem was you had middle-class Black families who made too much money to qualify for that, but still lived in majority black neighborhoods where the values of the homes were depressed and were affected by redlining over many, many decades, and they were excluded from any of those additional grants.
While the formula is no longer being used, some say the damage is already done. More wealthy communities have rebuilt, while others, 18 years later, are still recovering.
So many of those empty lots represent homes, represent families. Families who died, families who have not been able to come back.
And as disasters compounded upon New Orleans, our disparities were on full display for the world to see. And soon, we'd learn some saw them as a tragedy, while others saw them as an opportunity. And be sure to join us next week to learn how some found Hurricane Katrina to be the perfect opportunity to make New Orleans one of the most gentrified cities in America.